Hey everybody, welcome to the third installment of Fiction Friday. Tonight we're going to read a couple of the first scenes from a book that I've recently read called No Good Man. It is a book authored by Rebecca Lee Wesson, who has contributed to this channel in the way of a short story. If you remember, just a few weeks ago I uploaded a video called The Hat Man. That is authored by Rebecca Lee Wesson. She's really a good writer. This book is, I don't know the genre that you would classify this book in, maybe neo-Western. But as I read the book, I'm thinking No Country for Old Men and Fargo, and maybe some kind of Quentin Tarantino screenplay. It's that good. It's non-stop action. It has got so many twists and turns. If you're a reader, you like to kind of just get engrossed in a book where you have to go to the next chapter. Then you have to go to the next chapter to see what's going on. This is one of those. Rebecca and her publisher have given me permission to read these two scenes. You'll hear in this reading how action-packed this book is. Let me say that this podcast should be considered not for children. Adult, how do you say it? Parental discretion should be advised. Kids under, 18 probably shouldn't listen to it because of the language, the violence, and there is a bit of sexual innuendo. It's not graphic at all. She's very tasteful in this book with that kind of stuff. There is language and violence, and to me it makes it a good book. So I hope you all enjoy this. All of the information you'll need to click links and read a description of the book is just right down there in the description. Take a look at it, click the link, go buy the book. Hope y'all buy 1,000 copies of this book and get her in a place where the algorithm on Amazon catches this book and really gets it going. No Good Man by Rebecca Lee Wesson. All right, here we go. Saturday, October 5th, Solemn City. Jedediah stood in the open door of the Bluebird Saloon. Despite the rural surroundings, the molded silver heels of his black snakeskin boots spotlessly reflected the daylight outside. On the left heel was a coiled snake with its head upright. On the right heel was an angel. Her wings were extended to her sides and her face was mourning. He pulled his white shirt cuffs down through the sleeves of his tailored suit jacket, knowing they would be stained red soon and the shirt would have to be replaced. But he did not mind. It was not unusual for business to get bloody. He pushed a lock of graying hair that had fallen into his eye back into his head full of black and adjusted his sunglasses further up to the bridge of his nose. He cracked his heavy knuckles and felt the residual aches from the scuffle a minute ago fade from his right hand. Behind him outside on the gravel were the bodies of 11 men. Each of them wore blue jeans and matching black polos with the logo of a private security company over the left breast. On the ground in the distance, a security drone with the same logo blew sparks erratically. 4 of its 6 propellers were smashed from its fall to earth minutes before, and the camera on the underbelly looked like a shattered robotic eyeball that had fallen out of its socket. 4 of Jedediah's men stood over the limp bodies, watched him, and waited instructions. 2 more set their sniper rifles back into the padding of their hard plastic cases, snapped them shut, and joined the others. Horace, the 7th man, leaned against the driver's door of his black Lincoln truck with his arms crossed, looking privileged and resentful about that for some reason. Like Jedediah, his men had been given many nicknames over the years, but the Desert Parish Boys was the only one that stuck. The DPBs had shaved faces, cropped haircuts, and wore tailored black suits with a silver snake pendant pinned to the left lapel. If they had a dress code, Horace lazily abided by it. He wore black jeans and a leather jacket. His hair was long and his face needed a shave, and his attitude needed an adjustment. The Bluebird Saloon in Solemn City, Texas, was 350 miles mostly west and a little south of Dallas. It sat alone on a plot of dirt as big and wide as the eye could see in any direction and was too far from anywhere to get any business. There was no stoplight, no gas station within 20 miles, and no jobs, not even at the saloon, which had invite-only customers just 3 times a year. 3 times a year, a security cable buried 300 yards east of the saloon under the dirt at the end of the gravel drive notified the 12 security guards posted in and around the saloon if vehicles were approaching. 3 times a year, security cameras and a security drone helped with the other directions. 3 times a year, a Corvette, a Maserati, 2 Mercedes G550s, and 2 Rolls-Royces arrived and parked on the northern side of the saloon, their collective width wider than the establishment itself. But the security precautions were redundant. A half-blind man could see a person or vehicle approaching from miles away, and a shrewd one would learn to hear them way before that. This far out in the flatlands, the only sound on such a weather-free day was a light wind. Once that was taken out of the equation, hearing a trespasser was simple arithmetic. Near silence minus the sound of a light wind plus the distant sound of rubber on gravel equals uninvited guests. Nevertheless, the 12 security guards were Texan, which meant they were accustomed to courtesy. They expected that if Jedediah Warcrypt paid the Bluebird Saloon a visit, he would use the driveway like a gentleman. But the guards, however cultivated by Texan etiquette, were not good at math, and in the hills freckled with shrubs 500 yards north and south of the saloon, 2 sniper-trained DPBs, lying on their stomachs with their eyes in the scopes of their M82s, did not give them a chance to retry the equation. The 3rd time that year, the saloon saw customers. The snipers each fired a single shot from their locations. When the first 2 guards fell simultaneously onto the gravel in front of the entrance, more security guards were alerted and then imprudently ran to check on their comrades and fell shortly after. This continued for the first minute until the 4 internal security guards also alerted and went into the open. All 4 were shot upon exiting the saloon, but only 3 met the gravel. The 4th leapt back inside while the sniper in the south swatted the scorpion off the lens of his scope that had caused him to hit the man in the upper thigh instead of the head. By minute 2, there were 13 spent bullets, 11 big dead bodies, 1 dead drone, and a more or less clear entrance for Jedediah, who drove his blacked-out Bentley Mulsanne down the long driveway several minutes later like a gentleman. Unless the wounded security guard had maintained an extraordinary sense of calm and dexterity in the situation, in which case he may have been invited to become a DPB, Jedediah expected the man to react predictably and out of fear, which is exactly what he did. Somewhere around minute 4, when Jedediah was out of his vehicle and 2 steps from the entrance of the saloon, the guard jumped in front of him from behind the door frame with his gun pointed, eyes wild and mouth screaming. Jedediah grabbed the nose of the gun, yanked the man forward, and knocked him out with a trained punch to the temple. The guard fell to the floor inside the saloon, where, around minute 5, he died in his sleep from the bullet he took to his femoral artery. From the open door of the saloon, Jedediah could tell the establishment was a prop. It had everything someone would expect to see if they accidentally wandered in, everything besides customers. It was windowless and lit in a way that suggested it was always 6 o'clock at night. On the southern wall to the left of the entrance was a polished wooden bar top with a handful of red pleather swivel stools underneath it. A square TV VCR was mounted in the corner of the ceiling where the southern and western walls met and was playing a college football game recorded about 40 years earlier, judging by the attire of the coach talking to the players. The grainy footage was cut off by black and white horizontal lines that pushed and pulled each other over the screen for a few seconds, then disappeared and showed the game again, the teams now in the middle of play. Behind the bar was a wall stocked with unopened bottles of liquor. Next to it was a refrigerator with a transparent door that displayed bottles of beer that were likely warm because someone in the props department had forgotten to plug it in. The western and northern walls were covered by framed Dos Equis mirrors, and underneath them were square tables, like the bar top had probably been polished once years ago and not since. On the top of the table closest to the door was a remote control for the drone, and next to it was an open laptop that relayed the drone's footage until its robotic eyeball was shattered. 3 of the chairs around the table had been pushed out, and the 4th had been tipped over completely when the men sitting in them rushed outside. Jedediah stepped over the guard's body into the saloon and felt the hollowness of the wooden floor underneath his feet. He stood still next to the overturned chair, listened to the quiet, and waited. After a long, empty pause, a muffled voice came from underneath him. Jedediah scanned the wooden floorboards in the room and then walked behind the bar and lifted the black rubber floor mats one by one until he found a metal handle. And when he pulled it upwards, a rectangular wooden door lifted with it, exposing a wide and well-lit stone staircase. The basement of the Bluebird Saloon was handsomely decorated and 5 times the size of the bar itself. The floors were stone, and stained oak wainscoting covered the walls. A giant iron and frosted glass dome light was mounted in the center of the ceiling, where the wainscoting continued in eggshell white. On one wall, 6 polished steer horns were mounted into oversized coat hangers. Each one held 1 cowboy hat and 1 jacket, several of which were leather and beaded in southwestern patterns. On 2 other walls were framed paintings of cowboys doing heroic things, and underneath them were tall leather seats angled toward each other with circular side tables in between. Opposite the staircase was a bar, and behind it was a timid-looking female bartender. In front of the bar, in plasticky short skirts, were 5 more young women. Judging by the emotional drain on their faces, Jedediah assumed they were not there by choice. In the center of the room was a circular poker table with a green felt cover. It was scattered with poker chips, cigarette trays, and 6 sets of folded playing cards, and 6 tumblers with ice cubes melting in brown liquor. In the matching armchairs surrounding the table were the imperious gray-haired men known as the Big Boss 6 at their 3rd and final poker game of the year. 5 of them looked anxiously toward Jedediah and the 4 DPBs who entered the space unhurriedly. The 6th man craned his head over 2 layers of neck fat to see the uninvited guests behind him, and then scoffed and lit a cigarette. "Jed the Dead, the devil of the desert himself," the fat man said, with smoke billowing out of his mouth and nose. "I see that ugly face of yours survive the estate fire. I heard your folks burned till their flesh fell off the bone." Jedediah took his sunglasses off and put them in the inside pocket of his suit jacket, and then stood by patiently while the fat man continued. "Now, you've been a busy boy, haven't you? In the hospital for a whole year. Then taking care of your daddy's affairs around the world after that. How's it feel to wear pants, son? Think you can handle all that responsibility?" The fat man chuckled, and the silver bolo around his neck absorbed into one of his chins, which wiggled when he spoke. "I'm surprised you didn't come to visit us sooner. We've been waiting, 3 years for this moment, hadn't we?" the fat man asked the older man at the table, who exchanged nervous glances. Jedediah grinned. "How's my sister?" "Joan? She's crazy as hell, fucked in the head like you," the fat man said. "I hate the bitch, but I agree with her on one point." "What's that?" "The 6 of us will be a hell of a lot richer once you're in the ground." The fat man dropped his right hand under the table. He brought it up quickly again, holding a revolver. The others at the table recoiled as he tried to turn and shoot Jedediah behind him, but his bulging stomach kept him from aiming properly. Instead, he moved his arm as far as it would go in Jedediah's direction and fired, sending a bullet into a wall nowhere close to its target. He tried to shoot again, but his finger got wedged in the trigger guard and prevented it from resetting. "You fat son of a bitch," a man on the other side of the table hissed. "May as well throw your cards at him. Fuck you, Pickney," the man hissed back, and then squealed in pain when the DPD twisted the gun out of his hand. "You must be Wade Huckabee, Section 5, Jedediah said to the fat man, who cradled his finger into his chest. "Which makes you Holt Rollerson, Section 6, Jedediah said to the man on Huckabee's left. "Glenn Marshall, Section 1, Earl Pickney, Section 2, Roy Clement, Section 3, and Jim Allen, Section 4. The 6 men followed Jedediah with their eyes, their expressions full of dread and contempt as he passed clockwise behind them and tapped his finger on the back of each of their chairs. "You touch any of us and you got the entire Texas police force and every chapter of the Texas Hell Hogs to worry about," Huckabee said angrily with his cigarette pointed at Jedediah, who ignored him. "Slavery, drug and weapon trafficking, murder and corruption, theft," Jedediah said, listing the things from their collective resume as he passed behind Huckabee's chair again. "Oh, for fuck's sake, you're no better than us. I heard you threw a man off his own skyscraper in Tokyo because the deal didn't go your way," Huckabee said. "Did you come all the way to Solemn City to compare negotiation strategies, or is there a point to this fucking visit?" Jedediah stopped behind Rollerson again, smiled agreeably, and looked at the men around the table. "Where is it?" he asked politely. Huckabee chortled. "Come on, Jed, we both know you ain't getting the rock." "My offer is $3 million, Jedediah said. "Are you out of your mind?" Huckabee asked with his eyebrows raised in amazement. "How much are you worth, boy? 40, 50 billion? He pretended to count the fingers of his injured hand. "By my calculations, minus half your sister's cut, to us, that rock's worth at least 20 billion. So unless you're going to offer us a fair value, go on and kill yourself already. We'll throw the stone in your grave for free. Take our cut of your estate and be done with you and your bitch sister. What do you say?" "Whoever tells me gets to live," Jedediah said to the group. "Now wait a fucking minute now," Huckabee said with his bloated hands in the air. "Holt Rollerson won today. Half the stone is on its way to his place in Abilene," Earl Pickney blurted out. "Allen's brother keeps the other half, but we don't know where." Pickney looked down at the table and avoided the glare of the other men. Rollerson threw his stack of chips and cards across the table at him, and Jim Allen put his face in his hands and shook his head. "Damn you, Earl!" Rollerson shouted. "If anyone puts a hand on my Darla, Holt." "Everyone has put their hands on Darla," Huckabee said, laughing heartily. Rollerson scowled. "Damn you, Wade," he said. "I would have hung you next to them Mexicans when I had the chance, but you'd have broken the damn tree in half, you fat fucking pig." Rollerson stood up and grabbed the bolo around Huckabee's neck and then pulled it until his face turned blue. Jedediah watched them momentarily and then turned to one of the DPBs behind him. "Asim, tell Horace it's time." "And the biker?" Asim asked, putting his cell phone to his ear. "If he's there, he dies." Asim nodded. Another DPB walked behind Rollerson and dragged him back into his seat by his collar, and Huckabee pawed at his neck to loosen the bolo. Asim ended his brief call and dropped the phone into his pocket. Then he joined the 3 other DPBs, each of whom stepped behind one of the men at the table and stood patiently. Jedediah removed a large revolver from his belt and stepped behind Huckabee, who craned his neck to see what was going on behind him. Then he started to protest. "You psychopath! You're going to start a war over a fucking rock? We're a fucking empire. You can't do this." Jedediah pushed the gun into the back of Huckabee's head and pulled the trigger. The rest of the men at the table flinched, and the women at the bar screamed and huddled together. Huckabee's large body leaned forward over the table, and streams of blood from the back of his head traveled down his jaw and his chin and dripped onto his playing cards. "Oh, wait," Pickney pleaded from across the table. "You said I'd get to live." Jedediah stepped behind Rollerson and nodded at the DPBs. Before any more complaints could be heard around the table, they shot the men in front of them. When 5 more bodies leaned over the card table and turned the green felt top red, 2 of the DPBs holstered their guns and walked to the women. The first DPB dug into his pockets, and he removed 2 car keys, 4 keyless entry fobs, and 2 Glocks he had taken from the dead security guards, and then placed it all on the bar top. The second DPB added Wade Huckabee's revolver and 3 more Glocks to the pile. And then he addressed the women. "Now these are fully loaded Glock 19s. The other one's a double-action revolver with 5 bullets in the cylinder. Point and shoot. Any questions?" he asked. The women exchanged glances and shook their heads. And after a long pause, the bartender took their stilettos off and stood up. She grabbed a key and a gun and then walked hesitantly past the table of dead men and up the staircase. The other women did the same. The men listened to the sound of their bare feet running across the ceiling above them, and when they heard the sound of luxury vehicles leaving in a hurry, Jedediah pulled a cigar from his breast pocket and lit it. He put the revolver back on his belt, took a long puff of his cigar, and drew a large knife instead. Then he lifted Huckabee's head up by the forehead. A few minutes later, his white shirt cuffs were stained red, and the shirt would have to be replaced, but he did not mind. It was not unusual for this business to get bloody. The private drive of the Rollerson estate was shaded by a canopy of long-established live oaks. Their branches were like interlaced fingers with leaves so thickly woven together they blocked out most of the fading sunlight as Horace drove underneath them. Near the white stone mansion at the end of the drive, the tall trees turned into a manicured lawn that was painted yellow-orange by the dying October light. Trimmed hedges framed the mansion bright orange, and pink lantana filled in every gap. And surrounding the home as far as the eye could see was a green acreage dotted with evergreens and desert willows. It looked like a postcard, Horace thought, wondering how many bodies were buried underneath it. The driveway curved into a massive circle, where in the landscape center, circular topiary surrounded a fountain of baby angels pouring infinitely from a golden pot of water. At the top of the circle in front of the entrance was a Harley-Davidson patch, together with used replacement parts. The Texas Hell Hogs had more than enough money to buy the newest models, but Horace knew that wasn't their style. He entered the circle counterclockwise and parked behind the bike, somewhat relieved by his assumption that the Hell Hogs had sent a prospect or someone insignificant to make the delivery. But when he turned his engine off, his hands began to shake anyway. He closed his eyes to steady his breathing and then counted to 7. 1. He was 11 years old again. The rusty hinges on the screen door down the hall from his bedroom squeaked and rubbed together disagreeably in a low to high pitch, waking him up. 2. The cry of hinges reversed from high to low, and the plywood frame closed again. He pulled his blanket up to his chin, his heartbeat so intense it made little waves in the thin, tattered material. 3. He stared at the dim light pouring through the bottom of his closed bedroom door. He could hear a thumb trying to start a lighter repeatedly, and then heard the sound of a cigarette being inhaled. The tape on the bottom right of the NASCAR poster next to his door lost its stick, and the corner curled up and bobbed freely. 4. The footsteps dragged forward slowly down the hallway, and the corner of the poster flooded like a paper hand beckoning Horace out of bed and out the window to safety. But any movement he made now had to be calculated, or the old metal springs in his little bed would object and squeak and ruin everything. 5. He rolled off the mattress silently and slid under the bed. The footsteps shuffled closer to his door, and he held his hand over his mouth. He would not let himself cry. If his daddy came into the room, maybe this time he would fight him. 6. The shadow of his daddy's shoes stopped outside the door, and Horace bit into his hand to hold back a whimper. 7. His daddy coughed and mumbled to himself, and the shadow of his shoes shuffled forward into the living room, and when Horace heard the TV switch on, he let out a quiet sob of misery and relief. For the first night in a week, he would be okay. Horace opened his eyes again, feeling calmer than before. No one was pointing a gun at him, and the property was still serene. He opened his door, stepped down from the truck, drew his gun, and then looked around as he walked up the stone path to the pillared entrance. In an estate that well-maintained, there was always somebody, a gardener, a maintenance man, or a pool boy, all probably with their own quarters somewhere unseen on the property. But it was empty and oddly quiet, like the staff had sensed the inevitable arrival of Jedediah and fled someplace out of sight. Even the wind in the trees began to die down and slip away to safety. The heavy front door of the mansion had been left open slightly, and Horace slid through it sideways. On the left wall of the entry was a giant frame mirror. Underneath it was a pear-shaped vase, with a top as narrow as a beer bottle and a midsection as wide as a tractor tire. And on the right wall was a hanging rug that displayed a woven scene of laborers in a green field. A chandelier hung in the center of the ceiling, and underneath it was a circular wooden table with a vase full of blue and red flowers. And beyond the table was a double staircase that arched over a short hallway leading to another part of the home. And under the arch was a bearded man in a black leather cut with his back to the door. The top rocker on his cut said Texas Hell Hogs MC. The bottom rocker said Texas Hooligans MC. They were patched in a half circle above and below the head of a wild hog with a cigarette in its mouth. And on either side of the hog emblem were two smaller square patches, TX on the left and VX on the right. In the biker's right hand was a small black box, and in his left was the thigh of Darla Rollerson, a big-haired blonde woman who had her excessively made-up face smashed into his. Horace closed the door behind him and waited for the heavy thud to interrupt their moment. Darla let out a surprised yip, and pushed the biker away and quickly closed the top buttons of her pink sweater, looking suddenly reserved. "Heard of a doorbell, jackass?" the biker said, and then groaned when he saw it was Horace. "Billy," Horace said, confused. "Why isn't someone from Section 6 delivering the rocks?" "Because my boss is Roy Clement, and he was the last keeper. Now I'm delivering the rock to the new keeper, Holt Rollerson. You're really fucking slow, Horace, you know that?" "It's not supposed to be you," Horace said, running his hand through his hair nervously. "Just give me the rock and leave. I'll say I didn't see you." "Or what, pretty boy? You gonna kill me?" "You know I don't want that," Horace said. "I'm not giving you shit," Billy said. He reached his hand in the front of his pants and adjusted himself, and then winked at Darla, who had her back pressed against the wall of the arch. "I ought to just kill you, Horace. Then this business with the rock can finally be over with." He shook the box in his hand and began to walk around the table toward the door. "Kill me? What the hell, man?" Horace said, matching Billy's steps on the other side of the table. "Horace, I don't like you," Billy said. "Don't nobody like you, not even Joan. When Jed's dead, she don't need you anymore. So I'll just shoot you right here in Miss Darla's pretty house, and then wait on Jed and shoot him too. Then I'll take off. When I get home tonight, I'll sleep sound as hell knowing I got a worker at paycheck coming my way." Horace felt his hand start to shake again. "We had a fucking deal," he said. "No, you had a deal with Joan. Now she lied, and you believed her. That's on you, brother," Billy said, shrugging indifferently. "Plus you're betraying Jed. You know what it makes you. Makes you a snitch." "A snitch?" Horace shouted in disbelief. "I was a snitch for your club." "Can't trust a snitch, compadre," Billy said with his back to the front door. Before Horace could react, Billy drew a pistol from behind his cut and fired at him. Horace dropped down and slid behind the giant vase under the mirror with his biceps searing in pain. Darla screamed and fell to the ground with her knees to her chest and hands over her head. Horace looked around the vase and fired back, grazing Billy's shoulder with a bullet. He shot again when Billy ducked behind the circular table in the center of the space, this time hitting him in the knee. Billy howled and pulled the table backward onto its side, crashing the vase onto the ground and sending dirt and petals sliding toward the front door along with the black box. "You shot me in my fucking knee, man. Time out," Billy shouted from behind the tabletop, moaning and panting. "Time out for real, man. It's not fair. I wasn't expecting a fucking gunfight. I gotta reload." As Horace inched toward the table with his gun pointed, the front door swung open and slammed into the wall. Jedediah stepped inside with 4 DPBs behind him. He kicked the overturned table past Horace and into the staircase, and then grabbed Billy by the neck and raised him into the air. Billy grabbed onto Jedediah's hand and swung his boots around wildly, his oxygen-depleted kicks aiming desperately for something to hit. Jedediah closed his fist tighter and held Billy in the air until his face turned blue and he stopped moving. Then he let the biker's lifeless body drop to the ground. In a moment of bravery, Darla pulled out her cell phone. When the sound of the first number dialing echoed through the entrance, she let out a horrified squeal and whimpered. Jedediah walked over to her and took her phone out of her hand. "Call them," Jedediah ordered. He finished dialing 11 and then gave the phone back. Darla looked up at him with rivers of black mascara running down her cheeks. She took the phone and backed away under the arch and then vanished around the corner on the other side. One of the 4 DPBs picked up the black velvet box at his feet and opened it briefly, and then removed a device the size of a lighter from the bottom of it. He dropped the device on the ground and crushed it with his boot heel. Then he tucked the box under his arm and waited at the door with the others. As the sound of sirens started to grow in the distance, Jedediah walked to Horace and put his hand on his shoulder. Horace looked back apologetically. He held on to his bleeding bicep with his right hand and hoped for a sliver of sympathy he knew was not coming. "I don't know you lately," Jedediah said quietly. He reached for Horace's lapel and removed the snake pendant, and then turned around and walked back outside with the rest of his men. Humiliated, Horace wiped his eyes with his bloody hand and stared bitterly at Billy's dead body on the ground, dreading the storm of ramifications he knew would be coming. All right, thanks for joining me on this Fiction Friday. I enjoyed reading those 2 scenes from this book. Again, all the information you need to buy this book is in the description below. I'm also going to post it on Facebook. I don't post many things on social media. I don't know, it's kind of boring to me. Whenever I post stuff on Facebook, it's something silly. But I will put this on Facebook. I'll put it in the description here. Might put it on Instagram. I have an Instagram account. I'll put it on all the things that I have an account with, and you can find it there. So thanks for being with us tonight. I certainly appreciate it. We'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you.